Dr. Jasser, evidence is coming out now that one of the killers in the massacre out in the San Bernardino, California area likely has ties to terrorist groups back in the Middle East. We know that, we don't know everything, but what's your reaction to what happened there?
You know, as the details come out, we'll figure out how it differs and what the similarities are to previous. The bottom line is it's a common disease, common cancer, which is this separatism, this flow into sort of this theopolitical supremacism where this individual, and I'm not telling you I know the details, but look at the Chattanooga shooter. He had a blog that said he wanted to establish, he believed in establishing Islam on earth, and the West was in the way of that. So it's this conflict between those who believe that they'd want to die for American liberty and freedom and those who want to die for Islamism or the idea of not only ISIS but any Islamic state. And I think ultimately you'll find, you know, through their trips to Saudi Arabia, etc., was a demonization of the West, and ultimately they just were, you know, motivated to act against us.
President Obama and other political leaders often have a very difficult time making the connection between radical Islamism and the religion of Islam. Why is that?
I think part of their fear is not wanting to alienate all Muslims, so they do the minority politic game. I think the other is that our government separates church and state, so the government shouldn't get into theology. The problem is that Muslims are at that same time in history our founding fathers were. So our founding fathers got into the discussion of how bad theocracy was and how Christianity, if you love it, would prevent the establishment of religion. That's the conversation we need to engage Muslims in, because that's the identity that's radicalizing our youth, that pulls them away from loving America, and we can push them towards loving it. So I would tell my fellow Americans to do it from tough love. If you love Muslims and you love them as part of the American fabric, challenge them to push back against theocracy. And if you don't call it radical Islam, you're going to let then the Islamic groups dominate who speaks for our community. You call it Islamism, then it allows reformers like our summit that we're having this week to have a seat at the table, because we recognize it's a problem and we get past the 12 steps, past the denial and get into the 12 steps for reform.
You're a Muslim,
Yes.
so help our audience understand what is the crossover line? Why are there so few voices like yours speaking out against this radical side of Islam?
Well, I think part of it is that you know, our community has not really been engaged in owning it. They feel that it's just some other, it's terrorism, it's militancy, barbarism that they can't really feel. It has nothing to do with them, so they feel like it's not them. While in Egypt and Iraq, they see the Islamists take over government and there's an urgency. They've marched in the streets. So in America, in some ways, because they're protected, because non-Islamists are decentralized, non-collectivists, there's less of an urgency for us to come together. So I think this is another reason to call it radical Islam. You will start to tell Muslims there's an urgency here, because otherwise, if Americans don't see you as part of the solution, you'll see us as part of the problem. And France yesterday raided 3 mosques and shut them down. In America, that wouldn't happen based on our laws, but we have to show America that the reason that's a bad idea is you then push those ideas underground and you prevent the reform that we need to do. And I think there hasn't been an urgency, and as a result, Muslims have stayed asleep.
You grew up in this country. What is different about the experience that you had and some of the young Muslims coming up today that we fear are becoming radicalized? What's the difference today?
Yeah, my book, A Battle for the Soul of Islam, is about why my story, I think, is not just mine, but so many Muslims. My family were political refugees from Syria. We embraced the fact that we were able to practice our faith in America more freely than any so-called Muslim country. That immigrant narrative that our country is struggling with now as we feel how to do it, what to do with refugees, is so important. There are Muslims that reject America's idea, reject what we stand for as freedom and liberty, and accept Islamism. Those are those who are feeding sort of the enemy's ideology. The vast majority of Muslims believe in American freedom and liberty, want to serve in our military and government services, and I think just need to be engaged and have their feet put to the fire, if you will, to step up and be counted and help us in this reform movement.
Final question for you. Sharia law is not compatible with democracy. Is Islam compatible with democracy?
Who's Islam? My Islam, the Islam I teach my children to love America when I served in the Navy. You know, so that's the question. There's not one Islam. The Islamist groups like the Islamic Society North America and other Muslim Brotherhood legacy groups will proclaim that there's only one Islam and it's a moderate Islam. the House of Islam, this is not a battle between America and all Islam, but there's certainly a battle within the House of Islam. And until Americans start to take sides within that house, we're going to continue to be collateral damage to the battle going on within a quarter of the world's population. So Muslims may just be 2% in America, 10% in some countries in Europe, etc. But unless America starts to weigh into this battle, the theocrats are filling in vacuums in Syria, in Iran, in Egypt, and elsewhere. And if we don't weigh into this, this is going to be bigger than the Cold War was as far as a global war of ideas, and you can't win this militarily. The military part is the last step of a long conveyor belt. Muslims that believe in liberty are part of the solution. We have to engage them within the House of Islam.